There will be spoilers for this movie, so spoiler alert in advance. Immaculate is a 2024 horror movie starring Sydney Sweeney that is distributed by Neon, who are kind of like the sister studio of A24, both putting out risky films with really intriguing plots, such as recently Infinity Pool, I, Tonya, Ingrid Goes West, Parasite, Triangle of Sadness, Perfect Days, and Anatomy of a Fall. They also put out some really average horror movies like It Lives Inside, and now Immaculate is joining the list. To be fair, I wanted to like this. It was a brief 90 minutes, a far cry from the overwhelming runtime of The Nun 2, which was a fat 2 hours and sucked the entire time. That was bogged down in ugly visuals, filled with jump scares and an overall plot that went nowhere, only existing because it was tied into one of the most popular horror movies of the current era in The Conjuring. And clearly Immaculate is here trying to rip on some of that Nun fame. It's Nunsploitation, and it's not really that good. The movie has really great cinematography, the score is good, the design of almost everything is good. It's just as basic as movies come. I was hoping it'd be better than it was, but it never really stooped above being just a generic horror movie with tropes that you've seen in a million other films. It felt more like a throwback to cheap 1950s American international horror films or some lazy Italian giallo thriller than it does a modern horror movie. But it really wasn't terrible, just nothing above average, and nothing too impressive. Its idea of turning things up or adding on weight is just throwing in gory moments and lazy jump scares, even if the final fight climactic sequence is a dull, empty sequence where one character is chased through catacombs by another character, and that's really it. There's nothing more here than what's presented to you, and it's kind of boring if I'm being honest. Now, I did have a good time watching this, and I want to explain that. I saw this in a Union Square theater in New York City, and Sydney Sweeney herself, the star of the film, came out to present the movie, which was cool. I liked having the star of the film there to introduce the film. And honestly, she was there for 30 seconds, and then she dipped, and I'm not mad at Mrs. Sydney Sweeney. She has commitment. She probably had an agreement to be there and present the film, which she did. And then she went about her business. Good for her. I think her brief presence, which was one of the reasons I saw the movie, was something that enchanted the movie for everyone. It enhanced it. It was certainly the reason the movie theater I saw this in was totally packed. And seeing this in a packed theater 100% added to the atmosphere and the overall experience. It made the movie better than if I had just seen it in a totally dead theater. And everyone was collectively cringing at certain moments. People laughed at some of the silly chase scenes and clapped when it was over, but then everyone left to probably forget the movie. Now let's get right into it and talk about Immaculate and what it's even about.
So in the movie, Sydney Sweeney plays some nun who arrives at a convent in Italy that of course is filled with very shadowy and mysterious people who are all pretty creepy. There is talk about how you should get to gradually trust these people and get to know everyone. They do introduce the characters and you trust some of them, but it just still is very generic. They don't really have much character development besides what they're there to do, to introduce Sydney Sweeney to the convent. And it's very simple, it's very basic, there isn't a lot going on. The film features a main villain who's just a handsome dude cosplaying as a good priest, but he and many of the people who work at this church are obviously evil, of course. Oh, and they have this trope of these crazy nuns running around who are old and sick, and they take care of them at night, and of course, it's at night when there's a jump scare when one of these old ladies sneaks up on Sydney Sweeney. But of course, you don't know it's an old lady because they play creepy music and show a shadow, and then she tries to cut her hair while the sound blasts, and then they just reveal it's an old lady. And it's one of the nuns. Oh, it's like, don't mind Barbara, she's just not well. You know, and Sydney Sweeney's like, oh, okay, I won't. And the scares are just like that, repeat and repeat. It's just really kind of dumb. A lot of it is really stupid. At the beginning of the movie, they are showing Sydney Sweeney around the convent, and the handsome priest dude shows her a nail, and she's like, oh, what is that? And he's like, oh, this is the nail they used to hang Jesus on the cross. And being Sydney Sweeney, she really isn't that impressed or surprised or shocked or anything. She's just like, oh, okay, anyway. And throughout the film, she witnesses these weird things, these women in red cloaks with masks on watching her. There's all these jump scares that go nowhere, like when a nun tries to drown her and someone jumps off a tall perch and falls. And there's some gross out gore when they reveal what the person looks like. And then the handsome priest just goes from handsome cool priest who you can drink wine with to staring aggressively at Sydney Sweeney, and you're like, okay, something is wrong here, something is not right. But they don't develop it at all beyond that. You just get the something is off vibes. They won't let her leave. You get these scenes where Sydney Sweeney hears cries in the night that go nowhere. I mean, they don't really go nowhere. You kind of see what's going on, but it isn't really like it's built up to in a creepy way. It's just pretty simple. There are scenes where she actually wanders off, only to find people actually being tortured, and then shit just dials up to an 11. Like, okay, something's really off here. Like, no shit. Obviously, this is not just a regular church, it's an evil church, but they don't really do much in this film beyond showing the generic, typical offerings of your average horror movie. And the gore. That's not even good original gore, which kind of sounds messed up to say, but it's not like they do anything new with it. There's a tongue being pulled out and a toenail that comes off, and someone's face that gets shown peeled off, but it's nothing too graphic, really, or like over the top. I don't know, but if you're gonna do something like that, just lean into it. Make it as dark and messed up as possible. Or really, the imagery isn't really that original. There's just a couple of scenes, and they're all kind of meh. These were my favorite parts. I know it's messed up, but it's because everyone I saw in the crowd, everyone in the movie, was squirming. They were all screaming or yelling or laughing. It was like a really bland midnight movie material, and I was there for it. Okay, so remember when I mentioned they find this nail? Well, halfway through the movie, Sydney Sweeney just gets pregnant. It's just kind of random. You're like, what? How did this happen? Well, anyway, you find out at the end of the film, they somehow took Jesus's blood or DNA or something from this nail they used to hang him up, and they put it in Sydney Sweeney, I guess. I guess you could say she's got Christ in her. Well, anyway, the big reveal is, since she's pregnant, they are trying to have her have this baby so she can give birth to Christ? To the Antichrist? To be honest, I'm really not sure. The whole final act is a pregnant Sydney Sweeney trying to escape the clutches of the church after she finds out they have this whole demonic baby-making thing going on, and they try to stop her. And there's literally nothing too dialed up about the ending. It's really small scale. It's just her trying to escape, and of course she gets locked in this room with a lighter fluid, of all things. She burns the priest, she escapes, but not before she gets chased into the catacombs. And the burned priest escapes, of course. They fight, she manages to kill him, she escapes, gives birth. The baby is demonic or evil and hissing or some shit. She grabs a rock, smashes him, and that's the end. Seriously, that's the end. Now, you might be hearing what I'm saying and thinking, okay, well, what's wrong with her being chased by a creepy burnt priest through the catacombs? It's creepy, right? And the answer is yes, it is somewhat creepy. The missing part is they just aren't really doing anything with it. They show these catacombs really early on. All you get is Sydney Sweeney going, oh, there's catacombs. And the handsome priest dude's like, yeah, we're not allowed in there. And she's like, oh, okay. And then 80 minutes later, there's just this chase through them. But they don't really build anything off of that. You're just in these catacombs. There's nothing creepy, nothing really scary that we haven't seen before in there. And on top of that, this is supposed to be the creepy ending. There's nothing built throughout the film that really amplifies that. We should be scared of these catacombs. It's really just random events occurring, like the old lady tries to cut her hair, like the scream Sydney Sweeney hears. Nothing really builds up to anything too dramatic. And for contrast, there are movies that do this and build up to great creepy endings. Look at Suspiria. The movie might be slow-paced, and it does involve similar themes of witches and almost possession, but that movie builds up to a disturbing, really batshit finale. Look at Smile. That movie is also kind of a slow burn. It has suspense in it. It's very creepy. There's scares throughout, but it builds up to a finale that is so frightening, that is just so bizarre and unlike anything we've seen before. Whereas here, it's just kind of Sydney Sweeney being chased through a tunnel by some guy. Like, there's nothing crazy about the finale, nothing that feels earned. You know, I mentioned the movie was really good looking and I thought it had some good performance, but I mean, nothing really happened of interest. I liked parts of it. It was really simple, really quick, like an old school slasher without the slashing. But then I saw Late Night with the Devil an hour later in the theater, and that movie made me dislike Immaculate more. It just made me realize Immaculate is really dumb. I don't know, maybe I was expecting more. And the movie just ends so abruptly. There's nothing more than some violent scenes, some moody suspense and atmosphere, and that's really it. Maybe that's what some people like. Maybe some people just want a simple throwback movie. This really does feel like an old throwback to a cheap film, but from Neon, I was expecting a lot more. I wasn't expecting some drive-in level, just simple horror movie. I just wanted something more, and all they really do here is have some atmosphere, have some torture, and then call it a day. So let me know what you guys think. Did you like Immaculate? Did you think it could be better? Because overall, I thought this movie should have been way better. So guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of Immaculate.